Hey there, folks. This is story day. You want a story? You like stories? This has a little bit of an object lesson. And it was one of my very first real lessons in keeping chickens. Aside from lessons about the nature of guineas, which I learned previously. But this is a story of Hawkeye. Hawkeye was my very first rooster. He was also the only bird I actually ever purchased from an individual. And this was when my original flock that I got from a feed store, hatchery stock, when the original flock was 10 months old, I started looking for a barred Plymouth Rock rooster because I decided I really liked that particular hen, those particular hens out of the group that I had. And I began looking for a barred Plymouth Rock rooster. And I found one in the newspaper, locally owned by a young Future Farmers of America boy. And I went to see him. Hawkeye was, well, he was kept in, they said they'd showed him at a poultry show. He was not worthy of that, let me say. Maybe a local show, but an actual American Poultry Association show, they would have laughed at him. But I went to see him. Boy put on muck boots and led us into the woods, into a dark, dank, muddy, wet bunch of ramshackle pens. And one pen contained a bunch of production reds, and they were all into their little shelter because the rest of the pen was full of water. Well, Hawkeye was in the other pen with a turkey. Kid brought a butterfly net, and as he is going to catch this rooster, which he said, well, he'll never sit on your lap. Well, he was wrong. But I looked around me and I saw empty bags of corn. Well, he captured this rooster with a butterfly net. This rooster had kind eyes, but I felt a little pressured at the time, and I'd already been looking. I couldn't find any, which is bizarre. And my husband said, do you want him? Do you want him? And I said, okay. And we took him. Brought him home in a pet carrier. I'd already belonged to backyardchickens.com for at least a year. And so I was well aware that when you purchase a bird, you need to quarantine this animal away from the airspace of your other birds. And so we had a dog kennel set up in the basement in our spare bathroom, so we had access to water for him. He was separate from all the other birds, obviously, and we had hay for bedding in the dog cage, and he was warm. And at the time, I was feeding Southern States. I think it was Southern States food. I haven't heard about Southern States in a long time. I assume they're still in business. I don't know. The feed store where we got our first chicks actually sold Southern States at the time. I don't remember what else they sold. It's been too long ago. And we also used a scratch mix for the girls, which contained 12 grains, and 2 of them, one was whole kernel corn and one was popcorn, and then had 10 other grains, and it had a protein level in the scratch of about 12%, just in the scratch alone. So I didn't usually feed just 2 or 3 grain scratch. I fed a pretty decent scratch mix at the time. And I proceeded to put this boy in there. His comb was what a friend of mine, when she saw him, she called it an Art Deco comb. The turkey, I think, had damaged his comb, had grabbed hold of it and snipped part of it off, and it was scabby. And when I went to observing this rooster, as you will see in the pictures I post, he had a white coating on his his wattles. One of them was very thickened. It was like a paddle. It was scar tissue, actually, is what it was. Probably from the turkey that they stuck him in there with. And he had this white scaly stuff on his comb and wattles in his face. And his face was very pale. He was very pale. His plumage, the beautiful barred rock plumage that's supposed to be black and white, was actually gold and black from being fed only corn. But when we got him in there, you know, it was a few days and I realized that he had a nice little highway of lice on his behind. And so that necessitated removing all the bedding, putting fresh bedding, sprinkling diatomaceous earth all over the bedding, and sprinkling his tushy with diatomaceous earth, because I didn't have any poultry dust or anything at that time. I'd never used anything like that. But I did have diatomaceous earth for use with wet areas under roosts and for keeping weevils out of the feed and such. Just minor uses. Not as a wormer, because it doesn't worm. And I proceeded to get rid of the lice. A couple days later, he had no lice. It does work for lice. I mean, it was disgusting. Poor thing. So he had a fungal infection of the comb and wattles called favus. He had, his plumage was bad. He was very skinny. Now this is a 10-month-old rooster. He was the same age as my hens, my current hens were, my pullets at the time. Obviously they weren't fully grown. They're not fully grown until they're a year old. He was the same age. But during that time I consulted people about his condition. We'll listen to his breathing. His breathing was a little rattly, and the reason I consulted one of the PhDs in poultry science I've mentioned before, and he said the conditions he was kept in was probably what it was. And he had a giant tank of water, and there was the turkey that was black. It was just black. It was nasty water and fed corn, and in the dark, no sun. So, you know, he said, well, you know, he's probably developed, he could have a little touch of pneumonia from the conditions he was in. And he told me to give him Tylenol, you know, injectable Tylenol. And so that was my first, one of my first experiences with injecting antibiotics into a chicken. And he said it should clear up. He says he was sure it was from the conditions that this rooster was kept in. And so it turns out that that was all it was. Now, fungal infection of the comb and wattles, I had to treat with things that you treat athlete's foot with, antifungals. So then we started, let's talk about his feed situation. Obviously, he was not going to be fed corn. The scratch mix did have corn in it, but it had a lot of other grains. And I fed him the layer crumble. I know it has calcium in it, but this boy was very malnourished. He was fed the layer pellets and the scratch, the mix, was actually a game bird. It was called Knockout. You might be familiar with Knockout. It's like for game fowl, game roosters. And he was fed that. And interestingly enough, I watched him avoid the corn. It's like he didn't want to see that anymore. He ate everything else. In his water, I would crush a clove of garlic and float garlic in his water. Antifungal, antibacterial, that kind of thing. Immune booster. And we took care of him. He was in quarantine for almost 6 weeks. From time to time, I had a couple of dog cages, and I'd bring one up on the deck in the sunshine where he could actually see something besides the bathroom. And he was very sweet. He didn't bite me. He seemed happy to see me. He was very happy to be in a warm, dry place. Let me tell you. It was shameful for a FFA kid to be keeping chickens like that. Seriously. It's shameful, in my opinion. But after 6 weeks of this care, fresh air, sunshine, some sunshine. He didn't get anywhere near my girls, not allowed. I think you will see that except for that comb, that Art Deco comb, which was easily identifiable, you wouldn't think it was the same rooster. all the yellow in his plumage actually left. He didn't molt. It just, the plumage, all that yellow gold stuff from eating all the corn just dissipated. And his plumage was the proper color again. Now later in life, he became a little bit more brassy, but you know, it left. You can see the difference in the pictures. When I brought him home, skinny, gold, hunched up, to this big, hefty guy. Somebody said, well, you might need to put him on a diet. I said, there's nothing wrong with that rooster. He's healthy now. He's getting healthy. I'm gonna leave him alone. He got to free range. When he finally was introduced to the hens, he got to free range with them. He got to go out there and see green forage for the first time ever. He got to tell the girls that he was now in charge. That was interesting. But the difference that nutrition can make for even a rooster is amazing. So that rooster taught me a lot. And no, he didn't have anything contagious. Whatever was wrong with him was from his care, or lack thereof, or negligence. And I will say that that boy never was aggressive to me. Not one time. This kid expected him to be, so he treated him as if he was. And he just wasn't. He was good-natured. His sons were good-natured. In fact, you know, my little Bantam coach named Mace was one of Hawkeye's sons. My crippled rooster Zane was one of Hawkeye's sons. No, they weren't the most beautiful barred Plymouth Rocks. They were hatchery stock. They were McMurray hatchery stock. They were not so great hatchery stock, okay? And I've had some beautiful, stunning, excellent breeder stock since then. But they were good-natured, and to me, that's a very important trait. So, I hope this at least helps illustrate the difference that good nutrition can make for a chicken. And I've been meaning to tell this story for a while. I don't remember if I ever did. If I did, it was many years ago, and I think that video was probably deleted for lack of quality or something. So, there you go. There's my story of Rooster Renovation. Have a great day, everybody.